Ukraine is coming to Squad. Okay, so this isn't official, but why else would the Join Squad Twitter account put out a poll asking the community what faction they'd like to see next? Alongside France, Germany, and the surprise option of Japan, which I voted for myself, come on Japanese self-defense forces, please get in the game sometime in the future, Ukraine was far and away the most popular option, garnering nearly 75% of the vote, which doesn't really surprise me in itself. I mean, the war in Ukraine has obviously been a very important issue and in the front of everyone's mind for 2 years now. And if you look around, it actually seems like every single military shooter game has embraced it. We've seen Eastern European realism servers on Arma Reforger, first-person drones added to Arma 3, Ukrainian defenders fighting off Russian invaders on the Global Escalation mod in Squad, and there's even a new indie game called Glory to the Heroes, which is making a fully fledged tactical FPS in the Ukrainian theater from the Ukrainian perspective. It's been 2 years of war, and the gamers have spoken. Playing made-up conflicts between the US and Russia, or the US and so-and-so unnamed terrorist in the desert is boring. We've done it for years, we're sick of it, bring on the real stuff. Now, without getting political here, large-scale military strategy, infantry and vehicle tactics, new weaponry and technology, I mean, modern military combat doctrine is literally evolving and being written right before our eyes. And it makes sense for people to want to play that. But the bigger question is, what Ukraine are the Squad devs going to give us? There's a post gaining some traction on the Play Squad subreddit where a moderator on the official Squad Discord said this: "The main thing people aren't considering is the era of the game and the style of the game. Yes, Ukraine now has a lot of good equipment, but if you align all the different current factions, the time period the game is set in is around 2010, meaning that adding Ukraine, it would have less than what people are thinking. Imagine a 2010 version of Ukraine being added. Then think about it from that perspective and consider the rest of the factions." Real quick, if you're not familiar with what's been going on in Ukraine, this conflict actually started way back in 2014 with the war in Donbass, and I'm not going to get into the whole history of this conflict since that could really be its own college course at this point. But Ukraine's military 10 years ago was a far cry from what we're seeing today. Now, the idea that Squad is set around 2010 isn't necessarily an inherently wrong one either. Squad for the longest time had equipment and factions that represented militaries from that early 2000s era. And it's pretty obvious when you see matchups like the Insurgents and the US Marine Corps, which makes the game look like it's straight out of a Second Battle of Fallujah documentary. However, the game's recent design decisions over the past couple years have really shown us that this focus on early 2000s militaries may actually not be true. The perfect case study for this is the VDV, or Russian Airborne Subfaction, that was added to the game last year. Now, instead of the Russian Ground Forces AK-74M, the VDV's primary rifle is the AK-12, which was actually still in prototype and testing phases through 2015, only entering proper service into the Russian military in 2018. Additionally, the Sprut SDM-1 tank destroyer wasn't even officially in military production until successful trials in 2023. With these recent updates, it's now pretty obvious that Squad has begun to lean heavily on embracing modern military equipment. And although there are definitely some weapons that do feel dated, like the Ironsight M16, when I play Squad today, I simply feel like I'm playing a modern military shooter and not one from 20 years ago. Now, with that being said, this brings us back to the poll. If the Squad devs were to add a Ukrainian faction, what would it actually look like? Well, for the longest time, Squad players had actually thought we already had Ukraine in the form of the irregular militia. Although it was never confirmed, the faction felt like either Ukrainian militia or perhaps Russian separatists. We were never really sure which one, but since they spoke Russian, they used old Russian AK weapon platforms, they had banged up older Russian vehicles like the BMP-1 and the T-62, and they fought the Russian ground forces on maps like Gorodok and Yehorivka. And on top of this, not only did the Russian-Ukrainian conflict in the real world start in 2014, but Squad also first started its development in 2014. I mean, when you put it all together, irregular militia looked pretty much exactly what you'd find out in eastern Ukraine. Now, we did get an update to Irregular Militia where they changed a bunch of kits, and they actually changed the voiceover to Serbian, so they have officially moved away from Irregular Militia being Ukraine. And I think that's a sign that Ukraine as a whole might be in the development pipeline. If I were to bet, there's no way that Squad would introduce a Ukrainian faction today and not have it represent what we're seeing in Ukraine today in the real conflict. First off, this would cause so many unnecessary PR problems. I mean, can you imagine if it became publicly known that OWI intentionally made the Ukrainians a jumbled mess of militia while giving Russia Sprut tank destroyers and AK-12s? Yeah, that's not a good look. There's no way they're gonna do that. But also, a modern Ukrainian faction being added to Squad would play into the game's new unit system really well, with every faction being divvied up in mechanized, motorized, light infantry, armored, etc. Think of things like a Foreign Legion unit with a mix of NATO small arms, light transport vehicles, and maybe M113 APCs. Or perhaps you have a Ukrainian mechanized unit with both Bradleys and BTRs. And that's not even talking about the potential armored units where you could get things like Leopards, Abrams, and Challenger tanks all playing together on the same team. From a purely game development perspective, Ukraine would be a perfect showcase for Squad subunits. And with the overwhelming support for the faction on the poll, as well as the absolutely packed Global Escalation modded servers we've been seeing lately, it would really just be bad business for Squad not to do it. But once again, we're all basing this off of just one random Twitter post. This could be someone just trying to generate interaction with the social media. It could be a PR manager thing. I have no idea if the devs are seriously considering this, but I really wish they are, and I would love to see them in game. The reason why I actually voted for the Japanese Self-Defense Force in this poll was because when I think of a faction that I want to see added in Squad, I think of unique weapons and vehicles. Things that we see from Japan, Korea, Israel, India. Although there's always imported weaponry and technology, they have a lot of locally developed equipment that would frankly just be really cool to see in game and play with and be a nice change of pace from your typical AK and M4. Now, although Ukraine is literally AK and M4, it's such a cool mashup between Red 4 and Blue 4 that I think would have a really unique playstyle and would be a lot of fun. We just now have to sit and wait and see if the devs are actually going to do it. But what do you guys think? Would you be excited to have a Ukrainian faction in game? Do you think it's going to be a 2010 faction or a 2022 faction? Or maybe you were one of the ones who voted for Germany, France, or Japan. Let me know down in the comments below, and if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more. But that's it for me. Until next time, peace.